I completely understand that if there's no transparency there, you know, there is an incentive for fraudulent activity to exist because, some people are going to be very, very high moral standard. They're going to stand on morals and they're not going to do anything. But there are those people who say, if I did this, what are the chances that I get caught? And because of that, they look at the system like, well, even if I did do it, there's very, very little to actually, leave a paper trail or anything. It's very low likelihood that I'll be caught doing something like this. Based on that reason alone, I think the voting system needs to be more transparent. But why is it that you hear, and other people, I mean, you're not the first one to come out and say that, there's a lot of variances going on with our election system and the recorded vote and whatnot. You have a mathematician down in Kansas, I forgot what her name was. She's doing the same for her state. You have Harvey Washington. He's out there saying that, there's a lot of things going on. Why aren't we getting a lot of traction? Why aren't more people covering this and investigating what's going on?
Now you're getting to my pet peeve now. It all works, these conversations always go in the same direction. And ultimately, we lay out the proof, and then we come to the final. Well, I don't know if it's final, but the question is why? Why is this going on? How come nothing's done about it? First thing you don't have the media telling the people that the elections are fraudulent. They're not going to tell you that. Who runs the exit polls? The mainstream media. Six media giants fund the exit polls. The exit polls don't just exist by themselves. They're paid. They're paid by six media giants. Now, why is the word election fraud never mentioned on the mainstream media? Never. Why is it they never discuss the voting machines, how they've been hacked, which has been proven since 2003? Why do they never discuss that? There might have been a couple of feeble attempts, but whoever tried quickly lost their jobs. Okay? People who tried early on, like Keith Olbermann in 2004. If you remember Keith Olbermann, MSNBC, he had, after the 2004 election, there were all kinds of anomalies coming in. Vote counts didn't match. There were more votes than there were voters in a county. So he did a very good expose within just a few days. Well, he didn't last too long on MSNBC after that. Maybe a couple of years, but he wouldn't talk about election fraud after that. So you're not getting any traction because the media is involved in the problem. They're complicit. Now, who's instructing the media? Are they running the country? Well, I don't think ultimately the media is in charge. It goes beyond them. And I'll just have to let your imagination run wild.
Let me take the conversation, in actually a different direction. So when you actually bring this to people and you put in front of them all the evidence and you get like a lot of pushback, they'll just say it's a conspiracy or this doesn't prove anything or whatnot. It's like, what is actually happening there? Like, you've proved mathematically that what's being shown in the exit poll, which is done scientifically, and what's being recorded in the recorded vote being outside of the margin of error, which is scientifically not possible, the farther out you get. How do they square the circle? Like, why doesn't it resonate like it should?
Well, first of all, let me just say this. It's not just the exit polls. We have you mentioned Beth Clarkson, PhD in Kansas, and myself. We've all done independent work looking at actual votes in precincts, going from small to large precincts, how they diverge. The Republican goes up as the precincts go up, and in Democratic locations, which is counterintuitive. So what I'm saying, it's not just the exit polls. We have a few different techniques which are counterintuitive, which support, and they all come together and they all confirm each other. I did a true vote model, which is somewhat based on exit polls, but also on pure number of returning voters, and it matches my results from my models match the exit polls fairly well. So why does it not resonate? Why does it not resonate with people? I've there's a number of reasons. Okay, in some cases, it does resonate. People are aware that fraud exists in our society, and they're aware that fraud could take place, but they don't want to consider the full extent of the fraud. They think it's isolated. Oh, this election could be stolen, but in general, they want to believe that whoever was elected president was really elected president fairly. They don't want to accept the mathematical fact that our democracy is not a democracy. That the votes are not getting counted as we cast them. That is a terrific blow to the American psyche. You're brought up as a kid thinking that you live in a democracy and your vote counts. It's very hard to accept the fact that the vast amount of evidence shows that there's fraud, election fraud, and it's rampant. It destroys one's confidence in the whole system, because if you have election fraud, every other topic that is discussed is secondary. And that's why I'm disappointed that in this election, all this election fraud discussion is basically limited to people on Facebook or activists, but the mainstream media doesn't touch it. So if they did, and they allowed people to debate and discuss the mathematics and all the factors, people would become educated. People do not have the patience to do any analysis on their own, or they're not qualified. Numbers scare them. They don't want to touch it, or their attention span is limited. I happen to be kind of an individual because of my background, my experience with. I've been programming computers for 50 years, solving problems, all quantitative. I take certain things for granted. It might appear to be very easy to me, but the average person, has a bit of a problem. Like even when we were discussing margin of error, it's to me it's very straightforward. But I've been living with it for all these years now. So it's a combination of factors. There's willful denial that the government's not telling the truth, that the votes are not getting counted accurately, and that the elections are being fixed. Okay. Luckily for us, we did have the exit polls, which are really the only. Even the exit polls can be fixed. Anything's possible. I'll give you one little thing. I was using exit polls for my analysis, and then all of a sudden, 2012, the National Election Pool, which runs the exit poll, said they were not going to exit poll all 50 states. They were not going to exit poll 19 states. The excuse they gave was that it was too expensive. And, it would have cost a couple million more maybe to do 19 states. So now what they just did, they stopped exit polling after just 2-3 weeks ago. Indiana, I think, was the last election. They're not exit polling in California, not exit polling in New Jersey. The question is why? Why? California, you got the biggest state in the United States. So what people are doing is setting up their own citizen exit polls. And not that it's going to make much of a difference, but at least we'll be able to say, okay, the professionals didn't do it, but we did it, and we're coming up with these numbers, and it's showing discrepancies. So give us something to talk about.